Greetings, dear viewers. Welcome to Diaspora Point. This is your host, Auma Bella. Today, we have a phenomenal guest, a gentleman who is going to help us navigate through what is happening in DRC and from the perspective of how it is affecting the neighboring countries. We are in a really strange situation where there's a war in Eastern Kivu, the mineral-rich Eastern Kivu. Goma has been taken, and it seems like the war is advancing to Bukavu. Now, what is going to happen to us in the Eastern and Southern Africa if this war spreads with Burundi there, with South Africa there, with Rwanda there, and with Uganda there, and it can go beyond that? South Africa has already lost 14 peacekeepers, and they're very upset about that, of course. So now we have a gentleman from South Africa who is going to help us out as we discuss this grim situation. Please introduce yourself to our viewers and what you do.
Thank you for having me. My name is Petani Mazvandila, and I'm based in South Africa. I'm a writer and organizer based out in Pretoria. And as you have already said, the situation is quite difficult and saddening, to say the least, about the developments that we are seeing in Goma, and also as the M23 continues to claim more territory. It reminds us of the brutal years of the early 90s and until the early 2000s, where we saw the first and the second Congo War, where many people lost their lives. And some of the big challenges which were prevalent then are still even prevalent today, and they have not been resolved, or they have not been adequately dealt with throughout the different leadership that has came in the Congo, and also in Rwanda, of course, which shares the borders with DRC on the side of Kivu. And obviously a party to this conflict, and also affected by what could be a potential third Congolese war, as we could say. But as we are today where we are, the crisis as it unfolds, it reminds us of the brutal years of colonialism and how colonialism continues today to shape our social relations in the continent. And if we look at the heart and the difficulty of where this crisis and the war stem from, is of the fact of that arbitrary borders were drawn in the continent in the Berlin Conference of 1884, which divided families, which divided countries and kingdoms at the time, and one will belong to another territory of the colonizers, and others will belong to another territory of that colonial power. And that continues to shape the real and political dynamics in the continent today, as we see.
And with more than 3,000 people killed, 2,880 people are injured and counting, 500,000 people are already displaced. There was a bit of a ceasefire for a few days after the East African and SADC meeting, and now it seems the war has resumed. What is the mood in South Africa, given that South Africa lost 14 peacekeepers, and given the fact that we don't know whether there are some people streaming into South Africa? What is the mood? What's happening in South Africa, please?
As of last evening, 14 of the soldiers were killed in the DRC, their bodies were brought back to the country last evening and been handed over to their families so that they can start with the funeral preparations. But the mood itself, generally, mostly, I believe it is a bit of confusion, and also at the other end, for people who understand what is really going on in the Congo, trying to question why, even at the basic facts, are we even having our troops deployed there in the Congo? So many people are not informed really about really what is going on in the Congo,
Yes.
or really where does the crisis start from. So you find a lot of sentiments around, well, why are we even deploying our soldiers? Let's bring them back home because we don't have any real motive of why we are there. But in essence, for one to be able to understand really what is going on, we have to look back to in history. You will remember it from 1993, if not 94, in Burundi, the Burundian War, which lasted up to the early 2000s. We even had our soldiers were deployed there in Burundi in the early 2000s. Although times and generations have changed in today's time, where we have a lot of interaction in social media, we're able to know what's going on speedily as like in the past. So now we know that people died, and people are just saying, let's bring back our soldiers. But it is a very simplistic kind of position to take, to say the immediate deployment from SADC has just withdrawn because we have nothing to do with the war which is happening in Congo. But as of now, as you have mentioned, over 300 people have been killed, many have been displaced, and the number right now is of how many people have been killed and displaced. We don't know as the war is continuing to unfold. So really, the mood in the country is that people are divided in the sense that some are feeling that we should withdraw, and others feel like we should continue with the deployment. But when you look at the challenge and the crisis, as history has informed us, where we are, I believe we are in a point of no return, in which we're going to see a full-on war, in which the peacekeeping mission that we have been deployed to will radically have to shift and change due to the prevailing conditions and the dynamics that we are seeing on the ground. But one thing that must be very important to commentators and people who are trying to understand what is happening in the Congo, it is not simply good enough to reduce it to a minerals conflict, because the challenges here there have to deal a lot with identity and how colonialism divided people amongst people who belong to the same kind of kingdoms or belong to the same kind of tribes that have been divided by the brutal forces of colonialism, which partitioned our continent as they wished. So to be able to understand fully, you have to look onto why the questions that we have to respond to around the allegations which have been made by the Rwandese government about regarding the FDLRF, which is we know is led by the former Hutu militants who were at the forefront of the genocide in 1994, saying that they are organizing and working on overthrowing the government across in Rwanda, which are very valid concerns. But also importantly, what we have to look into is that how the history of the Great Lakes and how it has been shaped into today, and also the fact of the genocide. How are we able to explain and able to understand the current contradictions as they happen in the continent? So the issue of identity is at the center of the conflict, but also importantly, how the Banyamulenge people have been treated in the past by the government of Mobutu, as we know. Sometimes they were denied citizenship, sometimes they were given citizenship, but also the brazen weaponization of these challenges and crises of the Tutsi people who are found in Eastern DRC today by the Rwandese regime, using it as a tool to justify why they continue to destabilize successive governments that we have seen in the Congo. So the contradictions are many, but to be able to understand them, or to be able to understand where they come from, is to be able to understand how colonialism divided people and created countries and ethnicities of people who lived in harmony once as one people. And today they've been reduced to be enemies, and as of such have become victims of violence, which has been fueled by outside forces who have interest in their lands and also, most importantly, the minerals.
Thank you so much. That's a really detailed background to this intricate war, which, to your point, the colonialists didn't care how they drew their boundaries. They just drew one family on that side, one family on that side, different countries. But it's 60 years plus since we got independence. We need to try to live with each other from each side of the border and within communities to see how we can live well in peace and develop. These inter-country wars and intra-country wars are not very helpful. Yes, the Banyalenges were mistreated during Mobutu's time. Hopefully, they could be treated better and they could be given their rights. But who is to judge? There's so many moving parts in this war, and we are totally unable to pinpoint anything. Now, I think the most important thing here, yes, I understand when the regular South African feels that they shouldn't be there. The soldiers shouldn't be there, dying there for another country. But DRC is also part of SADC, right? And also is part of the East African community. So we are all responsible. We all have to try and help DRC, these rebel groups, as well as Rwanda, come to some kind of solution. It seems like there's a standoff, and we don't know what's going to happen. But in the meantime, peacekeepers are dying. In addition to the 14 South African peacekeepers who died, another 6 from other countries and counting are dying. And also with 500,000 people displaced, with almost 3,000 people injured, and with more than 3,000 people killed, this war is going to be a mess in the region. And now we can only appeal to all concerned to try and bring peace and to treat those who are caught in the wrong borders well and not deny them citizenship. In the case of the Banyalenges, and then also in the case of, there are some Hutus also who are fighting. There are different groups. There are another rebel group that are fighting, the M23. There has to be a way to solve this. Unfortunately, I think DRC's situation is complicated by that particular area particularly. It's complicated by the fact that it is rich in minerals. And there are so many players from all over the world, really, who have their hands in there. People trying to get minerals. People who benefit when there's chaos like now and there's war like now. The ordinary people. Give us your parting shots.
I think where we are now, we have already had first blood drawn, in the sense that the peacekeepers have been killed, and the M23 has basically taken over Goma. So it means that the other troops or soldiers who have been deployed in Goma are currently surrounded by the M23. So it's more like a hostage situation. That is the reality that we are facing now. I mean, if you are saying that they were protecting the city and the city now fell into the hands of M23, it means that they are surrounded in their camps and they have nowhere to go. And as you have seen, from some of the resolutions that were taken from the extraordinary summit last week of the EAC and the SADC summit in Dar es Salaam. There was also a position which argued that the Goma airport must be opened, which right now the M23 have refused to open. They've even released a statement saying that they will not be able to open that airport. So the reality is that what has largely happened is that the weaponization of identities and ethnicities, as it was done by the Belgians between the Hutu and the Tutsi, continues to reverberate in today's time, and that conversation has not been resolved. And something that I always like to say is that colonialism did not only disrupt our development and advancement as a people, as the African people, but it also disrupted some of the contradictions that we had within amongst ourselves, and then we had to focus on fighting the European invaders. It's like, let's just give an example of that. I have a brother, and our parents have died, and then we are fighting over the house of the inheritance that our parents had left behind. And then a third person comes over and wants to take over the whole house. So it means now that me and that brother were going to seize our hostilities and then fight that person who's trying to dispossess us of that house. So that's what happened, basically with European colonialism, is that Europe found us even with contradictions amongst ourselves, but we had to put aside those contradictions and fight against European colonialism. And by the time when colonialism ended, we did not revisit that debate of those contradictions that we had amongst ourselves. And that goes back to the lines the lines and the borders which are drawn on top of the lake in the Great Lakes region today, where you find that the argument which is being advanced was that during the Great Rwandan Kingdom, some of its territory extended to present-day Goma and Kivu. So therefore, that part of the land belongs to the people who are of Rwandan descent, the Hutu and the Tutsi. But also importantly, what you have to understand is that even with how each person narrates their history, they always try to make themselves the victors of that time in history. And what we are not able to do is to go back and draw our borders in the form of the kingdoms that we had before we were all colonized across the continent. And where we are today, it leaves us with a very difficult question of that: how do we move forward? And that moving forward requires us to dig deep into the contradictions that we have. And that is something that the great Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana had a solution to when he proposed the idea of that. By the time when we came into 1961, we already had over 30 African countries which were liberated. And that liberation, as Nkrumah proposed, said that let's unite our countries and become one country in the continent, to unite our countries and not divide or continue to balkanize. So the resolution that was taken by the Organization of African Unity, as it was known then in 1964, to say that let's keep our colonial borders as they were, has sadly come back to haunt us today, because as things stand right now in South Africa, something very interesting is brewing and happening. There was an MP in Lesotho. If you look at the map of the continent, you will know that Lesotho is landlocked inside South Africa. The MP of Lesotho is arguing that some part of the land that belonged to the Lesotho Kingdom at the time had been taken by apartheid South Africa and became territory of what is today South Africa. So they want to claim back that territory, and which becomes a very difficult conversation, but also truly because white people were dispossessing land from everyone. They didn't care if you were Msutu, they didn't care if you were a Venda like myself, they didn't care if you were Zulu, they didn't care if you were Luo, they didn't care if you were Gikuyu. They were taking land from anyone. And that's in reality, that means some land which belonged to another tribe at the time was taken by another ethnicity, or it was given, it was taken by white people and given to other people. So that is where we are in today's time. So the artificial colonial borders that we have today are one of the root causes of the problems that we have. But zooming in back to the Great Lakes and the crisis in Kivu, it goes back to how the Belgians weaponized the phenotypical differences between the Hutu and the Tutsi at the time, and said that no, the Tutsi people are superior to the Hutu people, so therefore you deserve to be leading and being in government, and that which led to the revolution in the 60s, where the Hutus revolted, took power, and then later in the early 90s we saw the RPF taking over power, and then the genocide which happened. So that war and that that friction does not only happen in Rwanda, but it also happens in Burundi. As you, if you have been paying attention, I'm sure you could see that the exchanges between the president of Burundi and the president of Rwanda have not been pleasant, knowing very well, but that both
No,
of them
it
come
was
from
not
the
pleasant at
two.
all. Yeah.
Yeah, it was not pleasant at all between the two opposing
Yes.
tribes, the Hutu and the Tutsi presidents, who are coming, of course, from a history that shaped how they relate to each other. So if we're not able to resolve that, so the reality is that the issue in Kivu and Goma as a whole cannot be resolved by the gun. That is the unfortunate issue.
No.
What has to be resolved? So the reality is that for us to be able to resolve it, we have to find a political solution, and that political solution has to look into the ideas of what Pan-Africanism meant in the time of Colin Nkrumah and what Pan-Africanism means in today's time. So knowing very well that there's these contradictions of ethnicities and identity in that region specifically, they are weaponized by certain factions who have interest in the minerals and the benefits of whatever they want to try and mine in that area. So the Banyamulenge are being oppressed, so therefore we are here to save them. But in reality, you are using it as a decoy to be able to exploit the minerals. So in reality, it's that the crisis that we're facing in Kivu does not only face that part of the continent alone. As we saw in 2011, the referendum that gave birth to South Sudan was also due to this kind of historical contradictions and challenges. And what you also constantly see in Ethiopia and in Somalia and so on and so forth. It reminds us of that the decision of the 1964 taken by the OAU has proven that it has not been able to resolve the crisis of colonialism in Africa.
You are very right. We have to find a mature and sober way of resolving this problem, because it is all over Africa. This arbitrary decision of making boundaries, which the colonialists did, is all over Africa. I mean, I'm a Luo here by Lake Victoria, but we have some Luos in Uganda, and we have some Luos in Tanzania, and we have some Luos in Sudan, and we have some Luos in Ethiopia. We just, all Africans, we have to find a mature way of dealing with this, not to deny any group of their rights, not to let any group take arms to take advantage of the fact that they were drawn wrongly and therefore they have to. We don't want to do that. We want to develop. We want to keep going. And I think it's not only Africa. I think all over the world, you find even in Europe, where borders are drawn, where some ethnic groups are on that side, and some, especially the Soviet Union. So the former Soviet Union, you will find a lot of that, and many other European nations. So we will have to be mature enough to find how to live with each other, regardless of the borders. Thank you so much for your background information, detailed background information, your wise recommendations. We appreciate it. And we will be revisiting with you as this thing goes on. We hope it ends tomorrow or today, but it doesn't look like it's ending anytime soon. Thank you so much. We appreciate you. And we ask our viewers to please give us a thumbs up. Please do subscribe, because the more you subscribe, the more we get wonderful guests like Mr. Pithani here. And kindly share widely. Thank you. Kwaheri. Bye-bye.